The terrific thing about this day is that so many of us, alumni, faculty, students, administrators, board members, have the chance to get together to discuss issues that really matter. This year, those issues fall within the theme, Learn to Live Well, Bringing Education to the Table. I'd like to thank the staff of the Office of Alumni Relations who did most of the heavy lifting for this event, lining up some of the most respected people in their fields. I hope you were able to be in the sessions this morning. There was plenty of food for thought, in the words of Dennis Walcott. Literally waffles if you were there, food for thought. His mandate to ensure a brighter future for the city schools is surely daunting. But being a Queens boy myself, PS 115, JHS 172, I know that he's well prepared for the job. And then there were the many lessons for healthy minds, bodies, organizations, and communities in the morning breakout sessions. There will be much more to think about in the lively afternoon sessions. We have social media for learning, healthy eating habits, and how art might lead us closer to that elusive fountain of youth. You will not want to miss the keynote address by Dr. Ian Smith from the class of '93, a diet expert, medical and health correspondent, and founder of the Makeover Mile and the 50 Million Pound Challenge, whose members, I should note, have lost nearly 6 million pounds. You'll also note from your menu cards at your seat, our chef was inspired by some of Dr. Ian's recipes from one of his most recent cookbooks, so you should be able to eat inspirationally as opposed to guiltily. If you haven't yet signed up for this afternoon, the Alumni Relations team at the check-in desk would be happy to help you. You'll find them waiting just outside the Cowan Auditorium following lunch. So, now, since people don't live well by education alone, let's enjoy the lunch that has been brought to the table. The Distinguished Alumni Awards ceremony will begin shortly. Now it's time for us to celebrate the great achievements of some of our alumni. I'd first like to welcome President Furman to the podium to kick off the Distinguished Alumni Awards ceremony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and for those of you who I did not see earlier this morning, welcome. And for so many of you, welcome back to TC's College and to TC and to our third annual Academic Festival. Academic festivals shine several spotlights. We showcase the incredible debate and development of ideas and discussion that goes on at TC. We, of course, spotlight our faculty and students and recognize our trustees and donors who make all these efforts possible. And this event is a special stage for our alumni, whose accomplishments and leadership across so many fields make the world a better place. We chose as our theme for this year's festival, Learning to Live Well, Bringing Education to the Table, and that, in both literal and figurative ways, is exactly what our graduates are doing. So right now we're going to honor a small group of alumni who have especially distinguished themselves in their different areas of endeavor. Collectively, these remarkable women and men span a range of interests and strengths, from the mediation and conflict resolution work of Violeta Petroska-Beshka to the Genocide Scholarship of Samuel Totten, from Diane Ravich's unsurpassed historical scholarship and analysis of American education to the philanthropy and community advocacy of Samuel Peabody, from Ruth Chris Sullivan's crusading work on behalf of children diagnosed with autism to the brilliant legal insights and analyses of our early career winner, Paul O'Neill. These TC Distinguished Alumni Awards are very prestigious honors, in part because the winners are chosen by a jury of their toughest and most discerning peers, their fellow alumni. With that, I turn the floor back to Robert Weintraub, Alumni Association President, who will say more about the history of this award.
So, to the ceremony. Teachers College as an institution is judged in no small part by the contributions of the graduates we send into the world. As TC alumni, we are ambassadors of the college. As we change the world, we make important statements about our alma mater. Today we are honoring 6 accomplished alumni whom we are proud to have represent the TC community. As I mentioned at last year's event, the idea of the Distinguished Alumni Award to recognize the achievements of TC alumni was proposed by Professor Emeritus William Summerscales. Either way, we love him whether he's emeritus or emeritus. William Summerscales. The first ceremony was held in 1975. In 1998, the Early Career Award was added to recognize recent graduates who have distinguished themselves in their fields. To our 2011 award recipients, who will become part of this legacy, we give our thanks. Give our thanks for embracing TC's mission. Our thanks for setting standards for which we all strive, and for reaffirming TC's commitment to repair the world. And now I'd like to call up our first faculty presenter, John Elegranti, who will begin the program, and you can follow along in your printed programs. John?
Good afternoon. I have the pleasure of presenting Samuel Peabody for the Teachers College Distinguished Alumni Award for 2011, and I invite Mr. Peabody to the podium, please. Samuel Peabody, society's values are fickle, and government budgets wax and wane, making social progress at best cyclical. Yet the need is constant for those who teach, whether in the classroom or by personal example, to teach what is truly important in life. In your words, a teacher, however specialized, should be a teacher of all things. Through your dedication to education, health, and community advocacy, you have bettered countless lives. You entered the ranks as a teacher only to gain time as you pondered what you really wanted to do. And as often happens, the way station became the way. You spent a decade in the classroom, including a stint at TC's own Agnes Russell School, and another as head of the lower school at Rye Country Day. Then you turned your eyes to philanthropy. With your beloved wife, Judy, you established Reality House, a drug rehabilitation facility in northern Manhattan, where you served as board chairman for 17 years. Next, you raised the funds and directed Broad Jump, whose mission focused on youth at risk. One day, a young Bronx teacher came to you with an idea for a program that would place promising students of color in independent schools. You listened. The result was Prep for Prep, which now boasts thousands of successful alumni. Most recently, you chaired the Citizens Committee for Children, which advocates for children and families and amasses the research needed to help legislators restore funds to social programs. They have since named an award in your honor, the Samuel P. Peabody Award for Community Activism. Samuel Peabody, when a former student called to thank you for helping him negotiate the path to adulthood You called it a gift. But the greater gift is what you have given to all who have gone on to do good in the world. For the love you have shown them and for your shining example to all of us in this room, I'm delighted and honored to present to you on behalf of a grateful Teachers College community this Teachers College Distinguished Alumni Award.
That's the most gracious, kindest introduction. Thank you. This is a great day for me. I don't know whether I'm more excited about meeting the new chancellor or Ruth, Dr. Ruth. Anyway, I am, I believe, one of the most fortunate of men, and on receiving this award, it is for me another validation of that belief. In 1950, as graduation from college approached, I was faced to having to make a decision as to what field of endeavor I was going to commit myself. My mind was a total blank until I overheard a conversation between two classmates. Why are you going to the business school when after 2 years working in a Wall Street bank, you will have learned as much and be paid for it as well? I grabbed onto that like a drowning man clutching onto a passing life preserver. 3 months later, I was a trainee employed by a Wall Street bank, the Central Hanover Bank and Trust Company, long since merged among several other such banks. Within a couple of months later, I had become engaged to marry a young lady whose father happened to be a trustee in my bank. My future was made. Or so I thought. Beginning with my third year with the bank, it became obvious to me, if not everyone else, I was not cut out to be a banker. Returning to my desk after lunch break, I saw nothing on it that could possibly interest me. So without even sitting down, I went up to the personnel and quit. On saying goodbye to friends I had made, I learned that my quitting was of no surprise to them, for after all, I had always worn blue shirts rather than the customary white shirts. Now I was back where I started. What was I now going to do? In order to give myself some time to think about it, I called a former teacher of mine, who was then head of St. Bernard's School, a private elementary boys' school on the Upper East Side. I asked if there was something I could do at his school while I explored other fields of employment. He said, sure. Come, run our library, coach the boys in soccer in Central Park, return them on the school bus, and fill in for absent teachers. By the end of that school year, I knew that this was where I belonged, and the following fall entered Teachers College to earn the required degree in education. The relief of finding myself or where I belonged was huge, and I took pleasure in burying myself in the courses that were offered, as well as in my student teaching, both here at the Agnes Russell Center, I don't think it exists today, as well as an extremely liberal school on the Upper West Side. I had become a teacher, and as such, have had a most happy and satisfying career. Thank you, Teachers College, for this award of recognition and for the tools and insights with which you provided me. And here I really have to thank posthumously my former teacher, Bill Westgate, who took me in at the school in spite of my lack of experience, and to my late wife, Judy Peabody, who was there for me at every twist and turn of our 59 years together.
Thank you, Sam. That was very inspirational. I would now like to ask Laura Smith to come up to present the next award.
Hi, everyone. It's my honor to present our next award to Dr. Violeta Petroska-Beshka, whom I'll ask to join me at the podium. Violeta Petroska-Beshka. The whole of human history has been marked by conflicts between adversaries contesting shared geographic or emotional turf. While our era has thus far avoided the mass conflagrations of the 20th century, local entanglements continue to threaten global stability. Your steadfast efforts to use education to temper the bitter relations of the ethnic factions in the Republic of Macedonia stand as a model for all who engage in such work. In a special report for the United States Institute of Peace, you write of the palpable dangers posed by ethnocentric and emotionally driven views of history, based on incomplete, selective, and one-sided interpretations of events. And you argue persuasively that Macedonia's future will be determined not least by how its children are taught about the recent past. To that end, with your colleague Mirjana Najevska, you founded Macedonia's Center for Human Rights and Conflict Resolution, which in 2002 organized Understanding Current History, workshops designed to provide insight into Macedonia's civil strife. Later, you and Dr. Najevska edited Narratives in Our History, a workbook that compels high school students to identify differences and similarities between Macedonian and Albanian tellings of historical events. While the gulf between factions still exists, you conclude that if encouraged to work together, and if given the right conditions in which to do so, teachers and students from different ethnic groups can find common ground in an attempt to create a shared history out of present events. In addition, you continue to contribute as a senior fellow at the Jennings Randolph Program for International Peace, a member of the Women Waging Peace Network of the Institute for Inclusive Security, and a member of the expert team that prepared Macedonia's second report on the progress towards Millennium Development Goals. Violeta Petroska-Beshka, for your inspired work in the creation of lasting understanding among human beings, I present you with this Teachers College Distinguished Alumni Award.
I was an official TC student almost 30 years ago. Unofficially, I continued doing that long after I got my degree. I came to New York with the burden of a small country that belonged rather to the East than to the West. It was my first out-of-home experience that shook me completely. It was both a challenge and a privilege for a young woman like myself at that time to study at Teachers College. Everything was different from what I had experienced before. That difference changed my life and shaped my future. It influenced my professional career, but also enhanced my self-esteem, broadened my horizons, and opened new opportunities. I am very proud of the award and very grateful for the expressed confidence in my work. And I'm very happy that I got this opportunity to share an important part of my past with my daughter, who is with me now. Thank you very much, and I apologize for my language.
You know, so many of us share stories about how much TC affected our lives and changed our lives, but I've never heard it from somebody from Macedonia before, so it's nice to know we affect people in every part of the world so much. I would like to ask Jeff Hennig to come up and present the next award.
As some of you know, Diane Ravitch, whose citation I'm reading today, is not able to be with us today, but her son Michael is. Michael, if you'd come up. I asked Michael if he could help me out by looking as much like his mother as possible. And he said he didn't think he could do that, and I've come to conclude he's right, so I'm going to edit this slightly as I read it. The story of American education during the last 50 years is a microcosm of the political, economic, and racial cross-currents that continue to play out in bewildering fashion across the nation. As the author of 10 books and 500 articles and the editor of 14 anthologies, your mother's published work demonstrates that she's one of the few observers with the knowledge and experience necessary to comprehend the whole story, and with the courage and candor to render it in full. Hers is a unique personal engagement with American education. She was at the Ford Foundation during the racially divisive battles between teachers' unions and local school boards during the 1960s. As Assistant Secretary of Education in the first Bush administration, she led the effort to promote voluntary state and national academic standards. As a member of the National Assessment Governing Board, she has been witness and participant in nearly every educational crossroads. Her thinking on issues such as No Child Left Behind and the rise of market-driven approaches to education has mirrored and informed the debate at the national level. After reading her book, her recent book, The Life and Death of the American School System, noted educator Howard Gardner pronounced Diane Ravitch a scholar who, quote, reports her findings and conclusions even when they go against conventional wisdom and even when they counter her earlier publicly espoused positions, unquote, unquote. The influence of her thinking has few limits. She holds the Brown Chair in Educational Studies at the Brookings Institution and edits the Brookings Papers on Educational Policy. She's Research Professor of Education at New York University, a speaker around the globe, a blogger for the Huffington Post, Politico.com, and Education Week. The list of her awards and honorary degrees is far too extensive to note here, but her most recent honor is the 2010 Friends of Education Award from the National Education Association. I'll break here. Diane Ravitch, for your immense contributions to school reform in America, for your groundbreaking work as a historian of education, and for your place as one of the leading education scholars of our time, we present you with this Teachers College Distinguished Alumni Award.
I'm glad that Jeff mostly switched from the second person to the third person, because although I'm very proud of my mother's accomplishments, I absolutely can't take credit for them, except perhaps in the fact that when I was a very small child, I allowed her to go back to get her graduate degree at Teachers College. Not that I really had much choice, but I'm grateful to Teachers College for allowing her as a as a mother to come back and spend a long time getting her PhD here, which she did, and also was a wonderful mother to me. She wanted to say that she's terribly sorry she couldn't be here today. She's very grateful for this award, and she's very appreciative of the education she received here at Teachers College. She wanted particularly to pay tribute to her mentor and her teacher and her friend, Lawrence A. Kremen. The statement, she gave me a short statement to read. If she were here, she would tell you of her concern about the present efforts to impose unwise reforms on American education. She would tell you that this corporate reform movement has two goals: privatization and deprofessionalization. Both of these goals will undermine education. She asks that you do what you can to strengthen public education and to support teachers and the leaders of our public schools. And she asks that you always remember what John Dewey said: what the best and wisest parent wants for his child is what we should want for all the children of our community. Anything less would be unlovely and will destroy our democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael, and would you please convey to your mom that on behalf of the 90,000 alumni, we would love to see her on campus at any other time. I would like to call Dr. Kathleen O'Connell to come up and give the next award.
Good afternoon. I would like to invite Ruth Crisp Sullivan to the stage. Ruth Crisp Sullivan. Autism is one of the signature disorders of our era, a mystery as profound as language and the brain itself. While the biological origins of autism remain unfathomed, in your words, sharing information is one of the most important and powerful things you can do. During the past 40 years, at a time when many physicians didn't even know how to spell the word autism, you have pioneered in informing the public, elected officials, and the media, and made sweeping and enduring contributions to policy, education, and support services. You began your work for the most urgent and compelling of reasons, because you were the mother of an autistic child. You were among the earliest activist parents in the field, co-founding in 1965 the Autism Society of America, now known as the National Society for Autistic Children. You have since founded several local and state chapters at the organization, and during the 1970s, you also founded and directed its National Information and Referral Service, as well as the National Association of Residential Providers for Adults with Autism in 2002. You also assisted in the 1994 founding of the National Autism Society of Argentina. At the same time, from the outset of your efforts, you have been determined to integrate the autism community with society at large. Along with your colleagues, you began to write early autism literature, creating accessible definitions of the medical condition and meeting with public officials on the local, state, and national levels. You were the first autism lobbyist at Congress, and one of your crowning achievements was to ensure in 1999 that autism was included as a separate category of the disability in the new Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. You have also authored 4 books and dozens of articles, spoken across the nation and around the world, served as an expert witness for due process and court proceedings in education and adult services cases, and even served as a consultant on the popular feature film Rain Man. Somehow, in addition to all of this work, you also founded and spent 28 years directing the Autism Services Center in Huntington, West Virginia, which under your leadership offered an increasingly broad spectrum of educational and support services across 3 counties. Thanks to your diligence, the organization now provides services to hundreds of families who have a family member with developmental disabilities. For this astonishing outpouring of effort and care, you received numerous awards, including the Autism Society Founders Award in 2007, and a citation of honor from the West Virginia State House of Delegates at a special session in January 2008. Ruth Chris Sullivan, for your tireless devotion in uniting, informing, and serving the autism community, and for your impassioned advocacy of disability rights, it is my great pleasure and our great pleasure to present you with the Teachers College Distinguished Alumni Award.
After all that, I feel I should just take my award and go sit down. I had some prepared notes, but I'm going to stray from my prepared notes because what I have felt since I've come here. By the way, yesterday I had breakfast right here. The last time I had breakfast there was in 1953, and my life has changed significantly. And one of the most significant changes was that I met my husband here. When Joseph was born, Joseph was one of 7 children. And by the way, 2 of them are here. Julie, raise your hand. And Lydia, raise your hand. They haven't always obeyed that easily. Julie just came in from Paris last night, and Lydia came up from Washington, D.C., so I'm very proud to have them here. But when I look at all of you out there and know the kinds of alumni this university has, the way my fellow alumni people have progressed in making things better in society and around the world. Here I am from West Virginia among you. I'm honored and humbled. What you have really done is giving me an award for something I have to do anyhow. I didn't have to have an award for it, but you're giving me an award. Not only that, in the Teachers College cafeteria where I used to eat. Joseph was born in 1960. The only place I had heard the word autism once in my entire TC career was from the psychologist that I had a course with. At least I heard it. When Joseph was 3 years old, he was behaving in a way that I had never seen, and I was a public health nurse with a bachelor's and a master's from TC. And I knew that what I was seeing was not something I saw in child health clinics. There was nothing like what I was seeing at my house every day. So finally I went to a psychiatrist, a child psychiatrist. We were living in Southwest Louisiana at that time, excuse me, where my family lives and where my family's from. And once a month, a child psychiatrist, there were very few in the country, would come to Lake Charles, Louisiana and hold a child psychiatric clinic. So although I was a public health nurse and I knew that it wasn't anything physical that I had ever seen, I decided to take him to a psychiatrist, and the first thing he said was autism. I'm so grateful that that young psychiatrist had read his journals, because in those days, very few journals, if any, had the word autism in it. And if even if you went to the National Psychiatric conferences, you would not have heard, much less had a presentation on what autism is like. This young doctor had read his journals, and I got the word autism. And I said to him, excuse me, he began to tell me, I said, what's it like? I mean, what does autism mean? And at least I'd heard it at TC. And he says, oh, he'll always be a little odd. Little did I know what he meant by a little odd. So I began to look around. At that time, we moved to upstate New York. And I went to the libraries at 2 medical schools in Albany, and also the area libraries, and could find almost nothing on autism. But what I did find said almost universally that the cause of autism is a mean mother. The mother who did not care for her children. We were called the refrigerator mothers. And if I told someone in a meeting that was a mental health meeting that I had an autistic child, I was not allowed to go in. So we started then at a tremendous prejudice against us as parents. The psychiatrist who did give the diagnosis, it was corroborated in Albany, I decided that I needed to meet parents because nobody else was going to take care of us at this point. So one time, she was a Freudian, and when at the last visit, her psychologist carried Joseph, 3 years old, screaming, kicking, being an autistic child at that moment, doing something he didn't want to do, to the car. I got in and locked all the doors, and I rolled down the window and said to the psychologist, "Thank you for carrying my little boy." I said, "I sure hope we can find something for him." He said, "There's nothing wrong with your little boy. You're just an over-anxious mother." At that point, I knew I could not depend on the psychiatric profession at that time because their literature said it, their medical school said it, so we had a whole culture of a whole group of people who believed mothers did it. So I had a few things I had to do. I had to organize. I knew that I had to organize and find other parents. So when this last psychiatrist said, "I would like for you to come to a meeting," I knew exactly what she had in mind. She was going to sit all the mothers around the table and we were going to talk about our problems. And if she could solve our problems, then maybe we could not have autistic kids anymore. So there was little known about it. It was extremely rare. The little few statistics that we had on autism was 4 in 10,000. That's 1 in 2,500. Now, according to CDC, it's 1 in 80. 1 in 80. This is a tsunami of what's happening in the field of autism. There was no known cause. There was no known cure. Only one state mentioned the word autism in its Education Act, and that was California. And it was the mention of autism to specifically exclude people with autism. So we had our job cut out for us. One of the things that I liked about being here today is that this is the first time I've ever been to one of your meetings, but the passion that I feel today and yesterday when I was here, but especially today, walking around the halls that don't even look like the halls I walk through anymore, and eating here, we had a long table, was the passion that I feel for you, from you as teachers. The only other group that I've ever worked with this size were parents. I'm going to cry here. The most passionate people for us were the teachers, generally speaking. The teachers had seen them in the classrooms, or they had seen them in other places, and they knew what we were putting up with. So the teachers now, if they come help these awful parents, especially the mothers, then the teachers would be tainted. So we had to be very careful about how much they collaborated with us, sometimes secretly. But they knew where the power was and they could help us. So when we met with this little circle of children, parents, who we were going to have kind of group therapy, I got all their names. I passed the sheet around, and the psychiatrist thought I was just collecting it for her. She didn't know. I was never coming back, and I was going to call every one of those people. And that was the first group of parents in the United States, maybe in the world, that gathered together in one place to form what is now the it's called the Autism Society of America. Because there was no known cause and no known cure, we had two things that we could emphasize. We could emphasize education or research. In fact, we wanted both. But we had to make a choice because we couldn't do both. If your child needs a lot of help that's not around, and you had either education or cure, which would you take? You wouldn't take a cure. You'd take education. Because if you don't get onto something that's proactive, you'll never get help. So I feel so honored to be here today. It's especially sweet when it comes from your own university, and how much I enjoyed being at this college, in this university, and it truly has affected my life. Marrying somebody from here, and I got the sort of sense that there was much care going on. Thank you very much.
Ruth, the award thanks you for your accomplishments, but we thank you even more so today for your passion and your care. It's contagious. I'd like to call on Margaret Krakow to give the next award.
It's my pleasure to present the award to Samuel Totten. Sam, please come up. Samuel Totten, if there is any lesson to be found in the violence of this new century or the last one, it lies in the dawning global awareness of genocide and its horrors. Few have done more than you to spark such awareness. For 30 years, you have documented genocide, compiling first-hand accounts of survivors, investigators, and many others. In helping create this field of study, you widen the understanding of genocide. You write that, quote, to even begin to comprehend the why behind the what, how, where, and when, unquote, one must examine many fields from national history to social Darwinism to the evolution of totalitarianism. By chance, teaching English led you to study genocide. You believe that students become passionate when they engage in world issues. In Social Issues in the English Classroom, you wrote that English teachers, quote, have the power to encourage students and teachers alike to turn the silences forced upon them into eloquent and collective calls for change. You encourage schools to become, quote, actively and courageously involved, unquote, as you yourself have done. You served as an investigator with the U.S. State Department's Atrocities Documentation Project, interviewing refugees in Darfur, and later published the book Genocide in Darfur, investigating the atrocities in the Sudan. You co-founded and edited the journal Genocide Studies and Prevention, the journal of the International Association of Genocide Scholars. You served on the Council of the Institute on the Holocaust and Genocide in Jerusalem. Your documentation of the mass killings in Rwanda led you to develop a master's degree program in genocide studies at the National University of Rwanda, and to publish the book We Cannot Forget, Interviews with Survivors of the 1994 Genocide in Rwanda. You have been honored by the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville, and have received the Richard Mead Research Award from the National Council for Teachers of English, as well as the 1995 Ed Press Award. Samuel Totten, for your extraordinary contributions as a teacher, researcher, and theorist in this most painful but essential of fields, I present you with this Teachers College Distinguished Alumni Award.
I seriously considered writing a talk, but I decided I wanted to speak from the heart, so I'm interested in hearing what I have to say myself. I have to say, first of all, that I absolutely love TC. I was here from 1980 to 1985, and it definitely was one of the best experiences of my entire life. I had the most incredible professors that one could hope to have. Dwayne Huebner in curriculum and in teaching, Ann Lieberman, Karen Zumwalt, Maxine Green, and Lawrence Kremen. Unbelievable group. Unbelievably supportive and folks who really cared about their students and who cared about the profession of education, and I learned so much from them, and I am so appreciative, and to be back here is absolutely incredible. I've had wonderful teachers throughout my lifetime. I mean, all the way from elementary to high school to university, undergraduate. I was an English major and then ended up at Teachers College. After teaching overseas for a good number of years, I was a teacher in Australia for the first 2 years. I taught in California. I'm from California. And then I taught at the American School in Israel, English and Social Studies. And when I was thinking of going to graduate school, I was living in California at the time and contemplated going to either UC Berkeley, Stanford, or Teachers College. And what brought me to Teachers College was the history of this college. Prior to getting here, I became immersed in reading about the different professors who were here, from John Dewey to George Count, Harold Brugg, Maxine Green, those individuals who were interested in, concerned about, and passionate about social issues, and that's what I was interested in at that time. When I was here, I was actually very interested in the issue of the nuclear arms race, very concerned about that, and I got a very nice note from Dwayne Hubner the other day saying that he remembered the debates in his classroom and how passionate the students were at that particular time in regard to social issues in education. One of the things that I really appreciated about Lawrence Kremen, and there were many, in fact I shared with a few folks that I always loved seeing Professor Kremen walking down Broadway because, you know, there's that cliche about having a bounce in your step. He truly did. And every time I saw him, I'd say, "Good morning" or "Good afternoon, Professor Kremen." He had this huge smile and he would greet you, and it was always one of those classes that I could hardly wait to get to because he was so insightful and knew that history obviously inside and out, and there was a professor who had a Pulitzer Prize. It was just something special to be in his class. Well, one of the things that he talked about that really had an impact on me was his, and if you had a course with him or if you read anything by him, you know about this, the configuration of education. And he talked about how obviously teachers are not the only configuration of education, or schools are not the only configuration, but he talked about radio, he talked about books, television, organizations such as the Red Cross, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, etc. And that really caught my attention because I thought, you know, there are many, many ways to educate in this world, and you don't necessarily have to go into a classroom. And one of the things that I was very, very concerned about early on was the issue of international human rights. And I go back to, people always ask me, how did you become engaged in genocide? And isn't that difficult? It is. I mean, I've studied genocide for the past 30 years, and I've spent a good amount of time overseas. I just got back recently from the Nuba Mountains, interviewing survivors of a genocide there that nobody seems to know about. It took place in the early 90s in Sudan, and I'm examining that genocide right now and comparing the situation and how the international community did not react and then reacted in regard to Darfur. But there was an early warning signal early on, and nobody paid attention to it. But I thought, you know, there are different ways to educate. And it's interesting going back and trying to answer the question, how did I become interested in social issues or genocide? And I'm going to share somewhat of a sordid history, but I'm not going to dwell on it. According to my father, I shouldn't be standing here. From the first grade through the 10th grade, every time I brought my report card home, I got beaten. And, you know, some people say beaten, some will say, oh, well, you got spanked. Well, to give you an idea of what I'm talking about and the one direction I was going in, my father would literally tear the house apart when he was mad and beat us. And when I brought my grades home, he would really work me over. And I got to the 10th grade. And finally, after he had ripped the house apart, he said, you know, I'm through caring. I truly think that you're mentally retarded. And he said, I'm not going to bother you from this point forward. And he didn't. And it was a blessing. It was a true blessing. And during that same year, I ended up reading a book, probably a lot of you have read it, called The Jungle. by Upton Sinclair. An interesting book. I had to read it for a social studies class, but what I was particularly captivated by was the preface. Because the preface talked about, and I don't know if this was an apocryphal story or not, but talked about, according to this author who wrote the preface, that it was a fact that Theodore Roosevelt had read this book, The Jungle, about an immigrant family who moved to Chicago and became workers in the stockyards. And Theodore Roosevelt read this book and purportedly pushed through the Pure and Food Drug Act. At that time, I thought, whoa, this is the power of the pen. This is the power of pen. Now, this happened exactly at the same time I was told that I was mentally retarded. Very interesting juxtaposition, I think. And so I've always been an avid reader, and I have to say that it was another teacher playing off this idea of the configuration of education who prompted me to become very, very concerned about international human rights and the protection thereof, and that was Rose Styron. And again, maybe a lot of you know who she was. She was a very well-known international human rights activist. Her husband was William Styron, the famous novelist. And she just happened to have written an article on torture in Chile. I had just graduated as an English major. I had moved to San Francisco to write the novel. I mean, that's what all English majors want to do, I guess. And I was living in Chinatown in a place that was $13 a week. And, you know, there wasn't a lot of entertainment, so I used to go to Ferlinghetti's bookstore. Lawrence Ferlinghetti, the beat poet. And every day I would sit in the same place and I would read books that I would take off the shelf, and he was absolutely fine with that. One night I go in there and here's this article by Rose Styron about torture in Chile, and I thought, you know, how come I never learned about this in high school? I never heard about this in college. I was an English major and a history minor. I'd never heard about this, and I was flabbergasted. At the very end it said something about Amnesty International. So I went to the Amnesty International office the next day and said, I want to volunteer. And they said, well, you can collate papers and you staple and things like that. And I said, no, I'm not interested in that. I want to help people. And at the time, I didn't appreciate the fact that I would have learned a lot if I had done that. But I said, no thanks. To make a long story short, I ended up moving to Australia and I became very involved in international human rights. The point is, I appreciate the fact that we can learn from different people in different places, and Lawrence Kremen put that together for me, and I've been so remarkably lucky in regard to having such teachers over the years, and I won't name them all. But since that time, since my time here at TC, where I had such passionate professors who truly cared, and I remember Dwayne Huebner constantly asking me, I told him, I'm not sure if I'm going to go on to teach the university level. I think I want to do something else. I want to really work on social issues, international human rights. And he would ask me every time he saw me, what are you going to do? Because he was getting ready to leave TC, to retire from TC, and he went to Yale Divinity School for another entire career. So he wanted to know what I was going to do. To make a long story short, I ended up teaching at the American School in Israel, met an individual who was writing one of the first theoretical works on genocide. By that time, I'd already worked on for Amnesty International in Australia and in Nepal, and I decided, you know, there are a lot of people working on international human rights now. There are a lot of people working in the field of Holocaust studies. There are very few people, this was the 1980s, focusing on genocide. And so I decided to join that new field of genocide studies, and since then I've dedicated myself every single day, I can honestly say 7 days a week, to something on genocide, educating about it, working on prevention and intervention, going to countries where people are flowing out of the countries because of attacks such as in Darfur and in refugee camps. And I'm happy to say that over the years, the field of genocide education has grown. I feel like I've done a small part to contribute to that, but I have to say that the foundation that I received at Teachers College, Columbia University, has been instrumental in regard to the work that I've done. And I also want to acknowledge my wife, Dr. Kathleen Barta, I met her at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville in 1988, and she's one of my greatest teachers as well. She has wisdom beyond most individuals I've ever known in my life, and she's been incredibly supportive. As I go off to these places, I mean, she really, and I don't want to sound dramatic, she doesn't know if I'm coming back. She's been incredibly supportive, and I'm proud to be here at TC and to have my wife here with me. Thank you so very much.
Sam, you're certainly representative of what Dennis talked about this morning when he said, look what a few influential teachers can do. Look what it yielded in you, and we thank you for that. So, for the Early Career Award, I asked Tom James to come up and present that.
Thank you. Paul O'Neill, would you please join me on stage? Paul O'Neill, public education today is an often daunting landscape. It encompasses federal and state requirements for student progress, alternative forms of school governance, special education standards, and much more. The need for legal expertise wielded by compassionate, dedicated practitioners who know and care about education has never been more urgent. With your diverse experience holding lead attorney positions in government as well as boutique law firms in both the nonprofit and private sectors, you are a rare find indeed, and you are positioned as a leading voice on many of the most pressing and cutting-edge education issues. After working for nearly a decade as a corporate litigator, you made a bold decision to leave behind the for-profit world and bring your legal skills to bear on education. Having struggled with learning disabilities yourself, you initially chose to apply your talent and experience at Newgrange, a nonprofit educational outreach center and school for children with learning disabilities in New Jersey. Seeking a stronger grounding in education policy and law, you subsequently enrolled here at Teachers College, attending classes at night while taking a job at another corporate firm to pay the bills. Since graduating with a master's degree in educational leadership in 2001, you have served as an adjunct faculty member here at TC, regularly teaching courses with titles such as Introduction to Special Education Law and Policy and Designing Charter Schools. You brought particular expertise to bear on the latter issue, having served as general counsel of the Charter Schools Institute of SUNY, one of the nation's leading charter school authorizing offices. You have since been an instrumental player in the establishment of many charter schools in diverse urban communities, such as New York City and New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. In your current role as president of Tugboat Education Services, an organization that advises education reform organizations on regulatory and strategic matters, you lecture to national audiences on education issues. At the same time, as principal in Cohen Schneider, LLP, you've provided board members of educational institutions with introductory and ongoing training in corporate governance, procedures, board employee relations, and compliance with the New York Public Officers Law and the Open Meetings Law. In addition, you have held key leadership positions in governing bodies, including as the current chair of the Manhattan Charter School Board of Trustees and as the former chair of the Education and Law Committee of the New York City Bar Association. And you have translated the lessons of these experiences for the larger public in your numerous books and articles on education law, especially with regard to special education and school choice. All of this in your decade-long career. Paul O'Neill, Your achievements in the field of education law in just one decade are remarkable and have already benefited thousands of education leaders and students alike. It is with great pleasure that I present you with the Teachers College Early Career Award for 2011.
Don't worry, I am the last one to speak. Thank you to the Alumni Association, to President Furman, to all the other leaders of Teachers College. Thank you to my friend, Dr. Ali Mazzara, who's sitting at my table over here, who I believe brought me to the attention of all those folks, and to my family, who's also at the table. So, Early Career Award. I want to clarify something here. I am not 28 years old, or however old one would expect one to be to receive the Early Career Award here. As the gracious introduction indicated, I spent a reckless number of years at various graduate programs, and I spent about a decade in the corporate law world as a corporate litigator at various fancy pants firms. And that was important work in some respects and noble work to do, but it didn't capture my passion. Also in the provost's introduction, you mentioned that I was a special education kid, and the two are related. My move away from corporate law to education law is directly related to that, because I got to a point where I was flipping pages one night about midnight in a case between a big chemical corporation and a big insurance company, the outcome of which I did not particularly care. And I thought, what in the world do I care about? What am I passionate about? And I looked back at the fact that I was a kid who had learning disabilities that were never diagnosed, and so I just quietly failed everything, pretty much, for my entire academic career up to that point. I was on Ritalin in about 1970, because I suppose I was bouncing around so much, they said, give that kid the experimental drug. But I struggled, and my family stood by me. My father is here, and I'm sure, although I've never asked him this, whether he was constantly beleaguered with people saying to him, don't worry, at some point he's going to win a distinguished alumni award from Columbia. But the very fact that my family stood by me through all of that is a good portion of the reason why I was able to overcome it and to get myself on a track where I was able to turn it around. And so when it was time for me to say, all right, I need to get into education because that's what I'm passionate about. I want to talk to parents who have kids like I was and give them some help on the legal side, tell them what they can expect and what they can do. I didn't have any of those credentials, and so I came to Teachers College. And I was very fortunate because I got here at the same time as a professor named Jay Hubert, who leads the education and law offerings here. And I showed up when he showed up. He offered a whole bunch of classes that were very helpful to me. Everything that I did at Teachers College helped me get a grounding and an understanding of how what I already knew how to do could match up with what was necessary in the education world. And I took classes in special ed and learning disabilities. I took classes in policy and law, and it really gave me my springboard to do what I'm doing now. And what I'm doing now, I am delighted to say, is fascinating work behind the scenes for education organizations that are trying to implement their own missions. It's a very tricky thing to deal with the public education environment. It is not self-implementing at all. You can have a fantastic idea on how to run a school or a state office or a city education department and have all of these things getting in the way of your good ideas, your reform ideas, and I try and help those folks do that. I'm a little awkward in receiving an award like this for the work that I do because I am not on the front lines of education reform. I'm not a teacher, I'm not a principal, I'm not a superintendent. What I do is try and clear a path, to help clear a path for those folks to do the incredibly difficult work and the important work that they do. So I suppose, on behalf of everybody out there who is working a little bit behind the scenes to clear that path so that those folks can do the critical work that they do, the most important work that we can do for our kids, I thankfully accept this award.
Paul, for being an example. I hadn't thought about this when you were selected, but it's such a great example of the role TC can play when somebody wants to make a change in their lives for the better of themselves and for the world. So thanks. Okay, before we conclude, and I guess we're going to have dessert after this, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, we'll have dessert after this. I'd like to thank our Distinguished Alumni Award winners, our Early Career Award winner again, and ask you for another round of applause for them. I would also like to thank the members of the Alumni Council for their dedication and contributions this year, but today particularly to the Alumni Awards and Recognition Committee, chaired by Susan Diamond and Vicki Cobb, for their hard work in leading such a passionate committee that takes great pride in selecting such a distinguished group of alumni for us to honor. I'd also like to thank all of you for being a part of this day. I encourage you to stay engaged all year long. You can find a list of upcoming events on the Alumni Relations page of the TC website, or subscribe monthly, if you don't do so already, to the email updates. I urge you to connect with fellow alumni online by joining Facebook, LinkedIn, or our Twitter groups. And please think about also joining one of the Alumni Council committees. If you'd like more information on that, you can contact Rosella Garcia, our Director of Alumni Relations, or stop by the information table at the registration desk. Now, just before you dive into dessert, I just want to mention that this is the last time I'll address you as the TC Alumni Association president. After commencement, I'll turn the reins over to a highly qualified successor, Adam Vane, and I become president emeritus. Thank you for the honor of serving you. So, enjoy dessert. Enjoy the remainder of the Academic Festival 2011. The keynote address will begin promptly at 2:30 in the Joyce Berger Cowan Conference Center, where we were earlier today. Staff members will be positioned along the way just in case it's been a while since you had to navigate from Grace Dodge to Horace Mann. Thank you very much.